We're back live with another episode of the Counterlawfare Report with Brian Vukadinovich. Hello, Brian. Good to be back with you.
Hi, Jason. Glad to be back.
Good to see you. There's been so much going on. There's actually a really interesting development in the world of counterlawfare today. You've prepared quite a bit of information for us, I know. But before we get underway with that, I wanted to let's see. I want to make sure our live stream is going there. Okay, we're good. I wanted to talk for a moment about possibly the biggest issue in counterlawfare, and that is Dr. Corsi's response to the treacherous lawfare being waged by the special counsel, Mr. Robert Mueller. I know, Brian, you've been very busy with the Posner Center for Justice for Pro Ses, and perhaps not able to fully follow what's been going on. But just today, Dr. Corsi has announced to the world that he's rejected the plea deal offered by Robert Mueller's special counsel's office. One America News and Jack Persovic have been reporting on this. I got a chance to communicate with the doctor a little bit yesterday, and it was interesting. I could detect that he was quite upbeat, but he did not reveal to me at that time what was planned for today, or I don't even know if he was aware what was going to happen today. But Robert Mueller's special counsel office had offered the doctor a plea deal where they wanted him to plead guilty to deliberately and knowingly lying to the special counsel's office. And you know, Brian, I've known Dr. Corsi for about 2 years, and I've always found him to be a very honest man, kind, and just a real straight shooter. So I was not surprised to see Dr. Corsi say that he refused to sign a document in front of a federal judge admitting to lying when he had not lied. He actually went as far as saying he would rot in jail before he admitted to lying. And I can't help but think that Dr. Corsi has played this quite brilliantly. Dr. Corsi is the author, of course, of the book Killing the Deep State. And one thing I've heard the doctor say quite frequently with regard to President Trump is that he always wins right at the moment where it looks like he's about to lose. And there are a lot of people who had counted the doctor out, and even a larger number of people who have been making stupid videos about Dr. Corsi, throwing baseless accusations at someone who I respect and consider a friend. So I'm quite pleased to see Dr. Corsi counterpunching. He's stated, Brian, that he intends to file a lawsuit against Robert Mueller's special counsel office. So we'll have to stay tuned and see what's going to happen with this Dr. Corsi versus Robert Mueller situation that's really developing today. So I want to congratulate the doctor on successfully avoiding what is a pretty common trap, this perjury trap.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I've been very busy today. I had a meeting with the Posner Center and so forth, and so I wasn't able to get to the news today like I normally do, because I very much keep track of things that are going on across the country. So I haven't been able to see what has happened yet on these developments, but I'll certainly be watching this tonight. And Dr. Corsi may be a lot smarter than what the government may actually realize. Government they have a way to use a lot of intimidation tactics and pressure tactics. And a lot of times they get people to plead guilty to things that they're not actually guilty of. We've talked about that at length on this show. So they might have ran into something there with Dr. Corsi that they may not be quite ready for. So time will tell, but if he in fact isn't guilty of what they're trying to force him to plead guilty to, he should plead not guilty.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll have the resources to battle that as it goes on forward. But if he's not guilty, good luck to him moving forward for sure.
Absolutely. And of course, we've spoken at length about how that's the method. They basically tie you up with, legal defense. And, certainly the doctor has publicly stated that it's been a very expensive ordeal. He's been, I think he said, over 40 hours of questioning with the special counsel. And he's used that language, perjury trap. So we need to actually speak to the doctor firsthand to get the full story, but as I understand it, he turned over voluntarily all of his devices, his computer, the various backup tools that he had, an Apple time machine as it's known, and more than one laptop, iPads, all that kind of stuff. So certainly I would presume Robert Mueller's special counsel office has been perusing communications between myself and the doctor, and I'm all right with that. Dr. Corsi and I have not communicated about anything other than the standard business of journalism and the type of interviews that we've done. So I'm so pleased to see the doctor fighting back for what's right. And this is perfect for our show, Brian, because this is lawfare, what's going on with the special counsel's office. There's been a lot of questions. We've spoken with Larry Klayman, who I'd like to have on the show with you sometime in the future to talk to Larry, but he has questioned the authority of Robert Mueller to even be conducting this investigation, because there are quite a lot of rules governing how a special counsel is supposed to operate, and there's an open question as to why someone as conflicted as Robert Mueller is even running this investigation. It's been going for like 2 years, and there isn't even an accusation of a crime against the president. So there's a lot of questions as to whether this is a valid investigation or just political lawfare.
Well, if you want to see corrupt government prosecution taking place, come to Indiana sometime, and you'll get a full plate of it. Trust me. We talked about that in the past, but all you have to do is come to Indiana, and you can see how the wheels of injustice actually turn. Indiana is the classic place for it. So I have a strong regard for people that are actually standing up and fighting for their rights. And isn't it interesting that the government always wants all of your information? They'll seize your computer files and all of your telephone records and email records and so forth. They want all this information, and yet when you try to get information to defend yourself of the charges, you always have to have this fight. It's like you're in a snake pit, and the snakes don't want to give you the information that they have that they're obligated to give to you. So
Absolutely.
it just seems somewhat unfair, the whole entire process of how the government works, and with the judges and the government prosecutors and so forth. The whole thing's basically a setup from the get-go. Not always, because there's a lot of criminals out there and a lot of crooks that need to be caught and exposed and go to jail. But the lengths that they'll go, I mean, I went through it in Indiana here 10 times over, actually 10 times. And then it was very disheartening to see a government, an Indiana government in this case, go to the lengths that they'll go to try to get a person, and a school teacher no less,
Unbelievable.
to try to pin things on a person that, were so obviously blatantly false. It's unbelievable. 10 times that didn't work for him. So I very well know what's going on, certainly at the state level and at the federal level, actually even at the federal level, because I have had some experience with the FBI and the Department of Justice as well. And believe me, that's not a real clean situation either, as a lot of people may think. We talked about that before in the past. So there's a lot of dirty shenanigans that take place that the people should be aware of for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I think this show is so important, Brian, because you and I, for the past several weeks, have been analyzing a number of these different legal cases that are in the public domain. Of course, you and I are not lawyers. We are citizens who are simply examining the facts of public justice and the justice system and civil cases, criminal cases, examining what's happened, what's on the record, and helping people to understand what their rights are. You've prepared some information for us today, specifically about prior restraint. And Brian, Crowdsource the Truth has been growing quite rapidly, so we've got a lot of new subscribers even this week, more than we had last week. So, I want people to be aware that they can purchase your book. Give us just a quick 5-second background on your whole story. I know we don't want to go through it every week, but you've been wrongfully prosecuted, as you said, 10 times.
Yes, falsely prosecuted 10 times, vindictively prosecuted. 10 times I was found not guilty, or the charges were dismissed, or the governor issued a pardon in each and every case. So everything that they tried to do to me in Indiana didn't work. And the bottom line was they were after me because I had stood up to them from a false arrest that began in 1981. And then they kept doing it over and over and over again. And they were upset about it because of the fact that I wouldn't do what pretty much everybody usually does, is just succumb to their pressure tactics. I fought back. I defeated them in most cases, even without a lawyer. They tried it 10 times to no avail, and they have egg on their faces and they don't like it, but that's what the government does. They do it all over the country. Yeah. So that's why I wrote the book. I just want people to realize what happens out there. All of the information on my book is fact-based. I name names. I talk about corrupt judges, corrupt prosecutors, corrupt lawyers. I have their names right in there. I have the facts in there. So if people want to really know what's going on, most of the time people just don't really have a clue what's going on. So this is a great opportunity. I didn't write the book to make a lot of money or get famous or anything. I wrote the book for one reason: to show the people what's taking place with a major portion of corrupt government activities in our country that is calculated to place innocent people in jail and to make innocent people look bad, just because simply they don't like you, because you will exercise your rights and fight back in this country.
And I admire that about you so much, Brian. The book, of course, is Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. You can purchase it in hardcover or as an ebook, both in the Nook format from Barnes & Noble, or if you prefer to purchase it from a CIA-controlled retailer, you can go to Amazon.com and get it for your Kindle. Brian had a great book signing event at the Barnes & Noble there in Valparaiso, Indiana. And the book has really been doing great, and I want to thank everybody from the Crowdsource community who's been supporting Brian. So let's get into our topic for today. We're going to talk about something called prior restraint. And why don't you help everybody understand exactly what that is, Brian?
Yes, prior restraint is it's a law in our country. It's a federal-based law where government agencies, government personnel, including any form of government, including judges who are actually government employees, cannot stop a publication from going forward before it's published. There's a lot of times that there'll be, and we're going to talk about this in detail here on this show, on what's going on currently with me right now with my book on prior restraint. What it is if the government finds out that you're in the process of publishing information to the public about governmental wrongdoing, a lot of times they try to stop that publication from going forward. They can sometimes do that, try to do it with a court action. They can do it with threats and so forth. And in fact, when we talked about on one of the previous shows, the Chief Judge of the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, Diane Wood, actually tried to prohibit Judge Richard Posner from publishing his book that he was writing about and getting ready to publish about improprieties that were taking place in the Seventh Circuit. And Judge Posner didn't allow that to happen. He went ahead and published the book, but that was another classic example. If a judge, a chief judge no less, is trying to do that with another judge who's trying to actually inform the public, just think about where we're at in this country as far as regular people trying to publish information about government corruption and government wrongdoing, such as what I've done in my book, Motion for Justice. I rest my case. So it's not allowed. It's not to be allowed. This is not a communist country, and this is the United States of America. We do not allow prior restraint, which is calculated to stop people from publishing information about government corruption in order that the people will know what's taking place. The government has no right to do that, although it does try.
Yeah, I mean, that's judge-on-judge violence right there, Brian. Not violence, of course, but, judge-on-judge, that's amazing. I mean, the more you and I speak and we hear about some of the people here in the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals, of course, Judge Posner has left the Seventh Circuit primarily for the reasons he's described on this very show. Let's call it what it is: corruption.
Absolutely.
So we're,
Absolutely.
with the exception of the highly respected Honorable Judge Posner, we're basically looking at a rogues gallery here, aren't we?
Oh, this is, when I look at it, it's actually very disheartening. It's very sad when I look up here and I see a Diane Wood, who's the chief judge, who's actually afraid to come on this show and answer questions that you and I have about things that are taking place in the Seventh Circuit. When I look at this Michael Caney on here, is just very, very disheartening. Michael Caney, now remember one thing, all of these judges, the reason they're there is they had the political connections to get there. To become a federal judge, it's a political appointment. So it's not necessarily what you know about the law and how fair you are about the law. It's pretty much it boils down to who you know. As long as you know somebody that's influential and can get to your United States senator and convince that senator to make a recommendation for you to the president, you have an opportunity. You have a chance to be on the bench. And I feel that that's what happened with this Michael Caney on here. And I could go on and on. We don't have enough time on this show to talk about the rest of those judges on there as well. But it's a disgrace. It honestly is. This Caney here, Michael Caney, he's from Rensselaer, Indiana, which is a small town. It's actually about a half hour from where I live here. And he's people in Rensselaer think that he is all of this and all of that, like he's some kind of a god of some kind. But if you really did your research, your homework on Michael Caney, you wouldn't come to that conclusion. I experienced it firsthand, and Caney knows it.
Yeah.
Caney, I was involved in a case in an oral argument before him a few years back, and Caney sat on that panel, a 3-judge panel, and was very critical of me because of my position that I will stand up for my rights. Didn't ask anything about the issues in my case. Called me, and used this word, a troublemaker, because of the fact that I had stood up for myself and my rights. But as the oral argument progressed, what I didn't know was that Caney had a conflict of interest in the case because a defendant in the case, his name was John Larson, who was a principal at the school that I worked at and was involved in the discharge there. He became employed at St. Joseph's College, where Caney's wife, Judy, worked at the time of the appeal in the case. But I didn't know that at the time. So then Caney took it upon himself to write the decision for the 3-judge panel, and he, of course, ruled in favor of the school, which also was a ruling in favor of his wife's co-worker, who was working with her at St. Joel College, John Larson. Now, when I became aware of that, when I learned of that information, that I was told that Caney's wife, Judy, asked him to make a ruling. She knew he was judging the case and asked him to do her a favor and let her co-worker friend, Larson, off the hook to rule for him. So when I found out about that, Caney had already made the ruling in my case. But when I found out about it, I filed papers with the Seventh Circuit addressing that issue, the information that I had, and Caney should have never been on that case. He had an obligation to recuse himself because of that conflict of interest. So what happened was, when I filed the complaint, and there it is there in front of you, the memorandum from the Seventh Circuit, I gave them the information, and mind you, Caney never denied it on the record that he was doing his wife a favor for her coworker, to help her coworker out. He never denied that anywhere in the record in the litigation. And yet the Seventh Circuit, after I filed the complaint and informed them of what Caney did, their ruling was they dismissed the complaint, stating that there was no. Is that the last page there?
No, there's
Put it on
more.
the last.
Sorry, I'm
Yeah,
getting
put
to
it
the
on the
next
last
page.
page.
Yep, that one?
Yes. It says that it was lacking sufficient evidence to raise an inference that misconduct has occurred, so they dismissed it. But yet, while the Seventh Circuit says it was lacking in evidence, Caney never denied that in fact he was doing his wife a favor for her coworker. He never denied that on the record. There's nothing in that record. So the Seventh Circuit pretty much, this is how they operate. They
Yeah.
just, things are happening and they just dismiss whatever the people are saying and they just go by whatever the judges there tell them. And why wouldn't Caney? And in fact, the troublesome thing here that really causes a problem for this order is this. Caney, thereafter, after I filed the papers against him, and after he wrote the decision in the case, he then recused himself after he did the damage in the case. So the question is this: either Caney should have initially denied it and stayed on the case from the beginning to the end, or he should have recused himself
At
from
the
the very
beginning,
beginning.
before the ruling, yeah.
Yeah, not recusing yourself after you've made
Right.
the damaging ruling. So
So
that tells you about Caney, how he
Exactly.
operates.
Let's take a step back for a second, Brian, because what you're describing is really important. You know, we hear a lot of people talking about corruption in this vague sense and everything like that, but you know, these judges, federal judges, hold a very distinct and important role in the power structure of the government. We're hearing about federal judges making rulings that defy the orders of the president. So what you've just described about these being political appointments and lifetime appointments at that, when we've got a judge in there that is corrupt and willing to do favors for people, I mean, that's not what the judge is supposed to do. The judge is supposed to interpret the law, not make rulings in favor of their friends and family members. This is such a critical issue that you and I are bringing to the attention of the public in a way that I'm not aware of being done before. You know, this show is not the people's court. You and I are not lawyers offering advice. You and I are not representing anyone or telling anyone what to do. We're pointing out these shortcomings in a system that really needs to be addressed in order for us to have any hope of achieving justice, because this guy gets appointed to the Seventh Circuit or whatever, and they've got this way of protecting each other. Chief Judge Woods refuses to, you know, you put a complaint in, who's answering these complaints? These other judges that don't want people like you or I or the American citizens out there who are watching Crowdsource the Truth and the Counterlawfare report. They don't want to defend people's rights. They want to defend their jobs, their friends, their families. This is so crazy. It's got to be spoken about.
Absolutely. And the only way that we're going to change this, Jason, is through the input of people. People have to get very proactive with this and aggressive. And when I say aggressive, I mean that
Legally.
in a lawful way.
Yeah.
They have to exercise their rights to let the government officials know where they stand, and we want change. Not only do we want change, that we demand change. We can't have an expectation of fairness in the judiciary when we have judges like Michael Caney sitting there for life, making over $200,000 a year and pretty much just screwing people over and doing whatever it takes to help the government along. And in this particular case, the information that I received that I gave to the Seventh Circuit, actually helping his wife's co-worker as a favor to his wife, which Caney, on the record, there is nothing in the public record that shows that he denied that ever happened. There's nothing. So people should just ask themselves that. Why didn't Caney state on the public record that wasn't true? I think we all know the answer to that.
Yeah,
question.
and in a moment, Brian, we're going to demonstrate a pattern in practice of Judge Caney doing this. But before we go there, I just wanted to tell you that some of the commenters are saying things like, you know, recusal is so convenient, but it's important that people understand, and I like to go through this stuff pretty slowly because it's complicated, it's very specific, and I'm not a lawyer, I don't understand it myself often the first time you tell us, but recusal is something that is done to avoid the appearance of a conflict. There doesn't even need to be evidence of a conflict. If there's any possible way that someone might think there could be a conflict, the judge is expected to step away and not be involved, recuse themselves, remove themselves from making any decisions related to the matter, and get another judge in there who doesn't have the conflict. So the notion that you would be in a legal dispute with someone who is directly connected to the judge's wife is certainly a conflict of interest that would warrant recusal prior to any decisions being made. And we've also got someone asking us, where is the chief judge to prosecute the corrupt judges? You've already answered that. It's Judge Woods, and she's standing up and defending them, right?
Yeah, nothing's going to happen with Chief Judge Diane Wood there, trust me. I mean, I could go on and on. I have a lot of information of things that are taking place in the Seventh Circuit that she just allows to happen, and perhaps someday we'll have a show on that. Right. But nothing's going to happen in the Seventh Circuit as long as she's there. And pretty much nothing's going to happen until quite frankly, until the members of the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee finally decide that they need to take a look at this problem, that the courts in our country are corrupt to a certain extent, and people have information. I have a great deal of information, and I'm not the only one. There's a lot of people in the country. I get calls every day about corrupt issues that are going on in cases. So the only way it's going to change is for the members of the Judiciary Committee, the House and the Senate Judiciary Committee, to hold hearings on this issue and to have people such as myself come in with evidence. Now, I'm not talking about just going in and crying and complaining. Right. I'm talking about going in with tangible evidence that there is corruption going on in the federal court system of the United States and that something needs to be done about it. That's the only way this is going to change. We can complain about it all we want, but until such time that the people that are watching our show here and other people start contacting their legislators, the federal legislatures in this case, that they want the committees, the Judiciary Committee, to start investigating this with hearings, then nothing's going to change. The people are going to constantly be screwed in this country. Right. All of the cases that are filed across the country, the overwhelming majority of the federal judges are ruling in favor of corporations and government agencies against the people. It's a fact. Wow.
Wow. And so, of course, educating the public is the first step, and I think we're taking a good step. I want to thank everybody who's watching and also remind everyone that it's important that they support Brian. Right now, Brian is selling his book, and people can buy that. It's Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case. And I really am so excited that we're doing this, Brian, because it's just, this is information that we've got to get out there. Now, one resource that you've brought to my attention that can help people learn about what's going on is this thing called Robe Probe, tell us what this is all about, this Robe Probe.
Yes, right here on the screen here, Robe Probe, it's online, it's on the internet, and any people that have information about judges who have been unfair or corrupt in some way in their case or any other cases that they know about, they can actually go on to robeprobe.com, and they can actually, you can find out information about judges on there, and if you have information about unfairness or corruption by judges, you can actually show that on the site here. And this particular page here shows that Michael Caney was put on the wall of shame on robeprobe.com, and somebody, a person put the information on there and just information that when I look at it, it's nothing new to me as far as what I know about Caney. But this is an opportunity for people that have information about unfair or corrupt judges where they can go. See, that this is one thing that works as well. Judges feel like they can't be touched. They feel like they're invincible, that because they wear that black robe, that people have to bow to them and not question them and so forth. And for the most part, people get intimidated by that, and judges know that. But judges feel so invincible that when they see this type of activity going on where people are actually informing the public, it has to make them think twice about what they're doing. It's not going to necessarily make them change, but it's going to at least keep a little balance there so they will know, hey, you know what? I better watch my P's and Q's here a little bit more in the future because the public is on to me. That's
Right.
why we need people to get on these sites and register their information and not be afraid to do it. People have to have courage about this, and they have to, when they see something happening that's bad, that a judge is doing that's wrong or corrupt, they have an obligation, a duty to report that. Now, granted, whenever they report it, it's always taken care of by another judge, but we can only do what we can do. So hopefully at some point we're going to put enough pressure on the Judiciary Committee members by demanding an investigation and hearings into corruption, federal court corruption. Once that happens, then heads are going to start rolling, and there will be changes that are going to be made in this country. We need a movement.
Figuratively speaking, heads will roll. Figuratively speaking.
Well, figuratively speaking, yes. And Jason, if you and I need to lead that movement, then I think you're on board
Yes.
with me, and we'll lead that movement.
Yeah.
And
So,
it just
and
needs
Brian,
to be a grassroots movement.
Just to clarify, yes, a grassroots movement. And what we're trying to encourage people to do is firstly understand the players, because I think most people don't ever think about this kind of judiciary structure and who's involved there and who these judges are and how they get appointed, etc. But as we continue on with the show, we're going to help people understand how they can contact members of the Judiciary Committee and demand these types of things. And hopefully over time, as the show gains viewers and traction, we can help raise the volume of the voice of the people of the United States to really draw attention to this. So how do we know that this rogue probe is fair and not just somebody who doesn't like the judge and comes in here and puts a bad review? And does this indicate that it's just one person writing this, or how does he get onto the wall of shame? Do we know anything about that?
Well, yeah, this particular person here, and they put the person's name in there, so that gives it validity. It's not something that is done anonymously than anybody. So the person's name is on there. So the fact that the person is putting his or her name on there puts validity to what they're putting on there. So this person checked off all negative boxes for Michael Caney, and therefore rogueprobe.com put him on the wall of shame where he belongs.
Got it. So if the judge wanted to argue with this, conceivably he could contact Rogue Probe and they know who the person is that's writing that, and it's not just some random hit piece on the judge.
Right. And there's the name. You can see the name right on there. It's not hidden. It's not anonymous. So whatever judge, in this case it's Caney, he can see who that person was and what he wrote about him.
I'm not seeing that. Where is the person's name?
It's right. It's on the bottom. Well, it's actually at the top there.
Oh.
No, there's Caney's name on the bottom of the page there. It will say. I think you got to move up a little bit. I think you got to move it up a little bit. I saw his name there.
Michael Stephen Caney. Oh, I see it right there. Is that it? Comment about from. Yes, there it is.
Yeah.
Leviathan's Hook. Well, that's a screen name. So, I mean, again, conceivably, there is some way for someone to just come in here maliciously, but this is a tool that we have for people to get a general sense, and I think it's going to be more accurate for people to rely on the type of stuff that you're presenting. So let's delve a bit into some more of the evidence that you have that indicates that Judge Caney is in a regular practice of manipulating decisions in the favor of his friends and family. You were recently interviewed, Brian, weren't you, by the Rensselaer Republican, which is like a local newspaper there, kind of nearby where you live in Indiana. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It's called the Rensselaer Republican. It's in Jasper County, Indiana. The county seat is Rensselaer, of Jasper County, where Caney is from Rensselaer, a lifelong resident of Rensselaer. And even though it's kind of a small town in a country country atmosphere type town and rural setting and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very powerful and very influential newspaper in Jasper County. It's probably the dominant newspaper in Jasper County. Probably more people will read the Rensselaer Republican probably than the Chicago Tribune in
Wow.
Jasper County. It's very, very influential, very much so. And Caney, what happened was I did an interview with a reporter from the Rensselaer Republican. His name was Nick Fiala. We did
and he contacted you about the book, right?
Yes, what happened was my publisher sent a press release out about my book, and then I did some of my own promotions for the book for the news media to be aware of it and so forth. So I'm not exactly sure. There's been hundreds of them literally that have taken place with the contacts and so forth. So I'm not sure if I contacted the Rensselaer Republican or if they contacted me, because of so many other interviews that have been taken. Actually, I have a TV interview on Wednesday coming up, and there's going to be an article coming up in the Chicago Daily Law Bulletin first week of December. So there's been a lot of interviews. Actually, Jenna Green, who's a very prominent legal writer out of California, she actually already wrote a story a couple of weeks ago. She wrote a story about legal issues and wrote a story about my book in there as well. So a lot of the newspapers have been very good about it. They want the public to know, they know what's in the book, and they want the public to realize what's happening. So they've been very good about it, but not all. And
Right.
the Rensselaer Republican here should be ashamed of itself here, because their reporter, Nick Fiala, called me, and we had a very extensive interview. And during the interview, and I didn't hold anything back. I think people that see me on here know how I do things. I put it out there. I don't hold things back, and I certainly didn't hold anything back with him. And as soon as I mentioned Caney's name, he asked, and when I told him about Caney, and I told him the story of what we're talking about here today, about how Caney did his wife, Judy, a favor, according to the information that I received, and made a ruling to help her coworker friend out, he right away said to me, well, that's Judge Caney's wife, Judy, correct? It's the same person? And I said, yeah, that's her, Judy. She's the one that's involved, and I filed the papers in the Seventh Circuit about it. So he knew who she was as soon as I started talking about it. He brought it up to me, told me that he knew who she was. Then lo and behold, I found out, looking on Nick Fiala's Facebook page, I see that him and Judy Caney, Caney's wife, Judy, they're actually friends on Facebook. So putting all of adding up 2 and 2, and in the end here, the interview took place, I believe it was on October 18th, and here we are now on November 26th, some at least 5 weeks later now. So a few days ago, I emailed Nick Fiala, and I said to him, I said, what's going on with the story? It's been a long time now since the interview. What's the status of the story? And he didn't respond back. So I waited a few days, and I sent him another email, a follow-up email. And I asked him again. I said, hey, what's going on with the story? How come the story hasn't come out yet? And again, he didn't respond back. So a couple of days later, I emailed the publisher of the Rensselaer Republican, and I informed the publisher of the paper that I had written, that I did the interview on October 18th with Nick Fiala, and that I had sent 2 emails to Mr. Fiala asking him why the story hasn't been published and so forth, and that he didn't respond. So I asked the publisher of the Rensselaer Republican to explain that. And guess what? No response from the publisher of the Rensselaer Republican either. So I started, thinking a lot about all of these things with Caney being from Rensselaer and so forth, and the influence that he's had. And the only conclusion that I could come with this Fiala being friends with Caney's wife on Facebook, and him knowing right away as soon as I mentioned her name who she was, and all of a sudden the story wasn't published. So there's something wrong here. And to me, it looks like a very, very suspect case of the Rensselaer Republican and holding the story back because they know that the information in the book is going to reveal, it's going to expose Caney for the type of judge that he really is.
Now, just to be clear, Brian, right here, this is Judge Caney sitting right here in the photograph that his wife has made publicly available on the internet on her Facebook page. She's not made any attempt to keep this information private. She is publicly publishing to the internet for anyone who wants to search for Nick Fiala, whose name is in the Rensselaer Republican. And as you've pointed out, he's directly connected. You know, Nick is friends with Judith Ann Caney, and Michael Caney is seated right here, I guess, in their home or wherever that is, next to his wife, smiling. This is the second occurrence that we're aware of the judge acting in a favorable manner or having some sort of influence with someone who's directly connected to his wife. And so would this be considered prior restraint by shutting down your interview with the newspaper, if that is in fact what's happened?
That is exactly what it would be. As I'm sitting here right now, I'm trying to get answers from the Rensselaer Republican, and they refuse to answer the questions about it. So as I'm sitting here right now, when you add everything up, it certainly points to prior restraint for sure on its face. There's no question about it. All the Rensselaer Republican has to do is be honest and say, hey, you know, we decided for whatever reason not to publish the story about your book and so forth, but they won't do that because they probably feel that if they're honest about it, they're going to have to disclose any influence by Caney if in fact that has happened, which certainly the arrows are pointing in that direction for sure. And so it very definitely would fall under prior restraint. And that newspaper should be ashamed of itself. A newspaper is doing a major disservice to the people that buy that newspaper. You know, in this day and age, you know, we buy the newspapers in the stores, and in this day and age, the newspapers want people to subscribe online and pay money every month for that newspaper to continue on. So they want the people's money. But yet, when it comes to a situation when there is actually information that actually affects that community, and I have to say here, it's there's another judge involved in the book as well from Rensselaer. His name is Philip McGraw, a judge who denied me when all of those bogus arrests were taking place, 10 of them. One of them took place in his courtroom where he denied me my right to a trial, a jury trial. And then you talk about a kangaroo court. No, you're not going to get a jury trial. I will decide this case. So then he lets a corrupt cop come in and lie and lie and lie. Then he puts a conviction in, which the Court of Appeals just laughed right out of the courtroom. They picked that case, as a matter of fact, for Law Day in Indiana. Usually they'll hold those cases in Indianapolis. So I was informed that they picked the Indiana Court of Appeals picked my case for Law Day, and they had it in South Bend. And the judges on the Court of Appeals really did a number on the state attorney general for his opposition to my right to a jury trial, and then they reversed McGraw's infected conviction. And so I wrote about all that in the book. To have a judge to deny a person to a jury trial and then say you're going to go to jail, you're going to serve time in jail, and you're not going to have a jury that's going to make a decision. I mean, come on, think about that. But that's,
these are enemies of the law. These are enemies of justice, not people upholding it. And I mean, I would have to say, Brian, as I listen to you here, in a general sense, I would think that these judges are correct in their likely assumption that most people are not aware of these additional procedures that you can go to overturn the judge's decision. I mean, a recent example that we've been talking about quite a bit is Michael Barden. Michael Barden is a guy who is a U.S. Air Force veteran. He was a firefighter. He's a guy who's working hard to raise his family and do the right thing by the people of the United States and the people in his community. And when he got in trouble for something that he's told us and evidence indicates he hasn't done, he hired a lawyer. He spent all his money on a lawyer, and he's relying on the lawyer and the justice system to protect him. But in fact, the failure of the lawyer to demand that exculpatory evidence and the failure of the prosecutor to present the exculpatory evidence, they've gerrymandered the evidence. They've given him the audio from the police body camera footage, but they've deliberately redacted the video. That is incredibly conspicuous. It borders on spoliation of evidence. If they no longer have that video, I think that would be spoliation of evidence that would basically exonerate Michael.
Well, I'm just gonna say it. What's happening is, you're exactly right. Basically, these judges, they know that once a defendant comes in and he's charged with a crime, whether the judge even feels that the crime is viable or not, the charge, that judge has no problem with letting that false charge, potential false charge, go merrily forward. So I'm going to tell you what it's all about, and I'm just going to say it. It's all about money. The courts utilize the people as a cash cow. It's money. It's money that the judges make. It's money that the bailiffs in the courtrooms make. It's money that lawyers make. It's money that prosecutors make. It's all about money. If they didn't bring people in there, it's to their benefit, to their financial benefit, to charge as many people as they possibly can and have as many criminal proceedings take place as they possibly can, because it generates money. It keeps the judges in, it keeps them with the job. It keeps the lawyers, it keeps their pockets lined. It keeps the prosecutors with a job, and it keeps funds going in, money constantly going in to the court. Even if you on a speeding ticket, if you ever look at the receipt, it'll have so much goes for this, so much goes for this. You're using these criminal cases it's a financial empire is what it is. I mean, think about it. If you can just write down on a piece of paper somebody did something, and then that person has to end up spending his life savings to defend against it, and everybody keeps employed off of it, and money keeps circulating. And think about that. It's a cash cow. That's what it is. It's a financial empire. That's what the courts are all about.
Not only that, Brian, just from the stories that you've told us, I mean, let's think about how all these players fit into the game. In Michael Barden's case, we've got a criminal defense attorney who has some sort of relationship, and I'm not suggesting remotely that the lawyer is doing anything wrong other than showing by his behavior that he's part of this system. When people stand up and resist it, as you have, those people meet a lot of pushback and they try to get pushed out. When you're a lawyer who goes along with making this case easy for the judge, running another defendant through there, getting a plea deal done, everybody can go to lunch early, the lawyer gets his 35 grand, Michael Barden goes to jail, or otherwise suffers the consequences of being labeled a felon for the rest of his life. And this is what we're actually looking at there, is going along to get along. And the lawyers that cooperate with that system, well, maybe they become the lawyers that are among those like the judge you told us about, who, when you presented yourself pro se, you were a bump in this road. That judge wanted you to use a lawyer that he knew was going to go along with the program and keep it all rolling along smoothly. And the fact that we see judges like Michael Caney more than once getting involved in, greasing the skids in such a way that it benefits his wife's friends, or, his wife's friends alert him that, hey, there's this guy who wrote this book that's not so favorable of the judge. They're all kind of scratching each other's backs. And of course, these judges were once lawyers. So they want to keep this entire system intact by making sure that they don't get someone in there who they consider a troublemaker, as Judge Caney called you, or we see Judge Posner was fighting for the rights of pro se litigants and defendants, and he got pushed out, and Judge Woods didn't want to deal with him.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, that's a state that we're in our country right now. We end up, if somebody is a good person, such as Judge Posner was, and will stand up and be critical of a corrupt court as he was, that's what happens. You just get pushed out. If you get a person like me, I was a teacher, and if you fight back, as I did, to a false charge way back in the day, then there's a penalty to pay for it. So it's very unfair. But that's the state of affairs that we're in the country. These people, and like you said, they're just lawyers. See, all of this stuff about we have to stand up. Hey, I'm all for respecting the judiciary and all that kind of stuff, but that because somebody who was a lawyer, because he was politically connected, puts on a black robe, and now I have to stand up when he comes into the room and almost bow to that person. And it's just it's the whole thing's a sham. It's a show, is what it is. Because all it is a black robe. I don't look at the black robe when I'm in court, and I went into the case that federal trial that I went through, that I actually was able to win in a 5-day jury trial, irrespective of all the things that were taking place with the judge and the opposing lawyers. I was still able to convince the jury that what they did was wrong. And the last thing that I was going to allow intimidate me was a black robe. See, what I look at when I walk into a courtroom, and I did this with all of the state criminal cases that I fought and won without lawyers. I look at the person underneath that black robe for what that person is made of. I could care less about that black robe. They think that because they put that black robe on, that it's basically an intimidation tactic, is what it is.
Well, and that's important, because we see that intimidation moving up the chain all the way to Robert Mueller and the situation we were talking about earlier with Dr. Corsi, for instance. So, of course, the book, again, is Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, and Brian's written this book about his experiences in defending 10 malicious criminal prosecutions, successfully defending them pro se, and also his pro se civil case against the school board for wrongful termination, where he was also victorious. People can purchase the book in either hardcover or as an ebook. So this is a really important book for everybody to read. Brian, we've got just a few minutes left, so I want to read you some of the comments that we're getting, because I think people are very interested in what we're talking about, and we're getting some very interesting comments here. People are saying that they're afraid of Dr. Corsi speaking out publicly against the corruption. We've got Dan talking about having to pay $137.50 for a jury trial, and then they dropped his case and there was no refund. JVA JVA is talking about a Brady violation. What is a Brady violation, Brian?
Okay, Brady violation would be it's technically Brady versus Maryland. It's a Supreme Court case. It's a violation of the prosecution not coming forward with exculpatory evidence where they're trying to obtain a conviction or have received a conviction. That would be a Brady violation.
Okay. And then Sandra is commenting that the first thing that goes missing is the video. We've heard a lot of different stories where police body camera footage was unavailable. And, you know, body camera footage is very important in revealing the facts and details of the evidence of a particular incident. There's one release of police body camera footage that I'm thinking about where the mother of a 19-year-old Colorado man was screaming about police brutality and racism, and the release of the body camera footage revealed that the 19-year-old suspect had charged at the police with a deadly weapon, and after something like 30 to 40 commands to drop the knife, the person had to be subdued, unfortunately fatally. But you know, this evidence shows that the police acted completely by the book and behaved properly. So that was an example of proper police conduct. I'm very suspicious of these cases in which we don't see the body camera footage. The alleged murder of Seth Rich, where's the body camera footage? We supposedly Seth Rich was alive, speaking to the police. This case with Michael Barden, where's the body camera footage? Why are these police officers wearing body cameras if we're never going to see the footage? People are asking if you know Larry Klayman, Brian. I know you guys haven't met, but are you aware of Larry?
I don't know too much about him, but I'm certainly going to research and find out as much as I can, because I think we're going to probably come on here at some point and talk. So
I spoke to him earlier today, and I was telling him about the show, and I would love to have him on here. Larry's involved in defending a lot of cases where people are sort of getting the shaft. You know, we've heard about a lot of friends of the show, like Laura Loomer has been kicked off of Twitter. It's a gross violation of her First Amendment rights. And of course, Twitter is a private company, but you know, it raises a concern about, you know, what is Twitter doing? And there is an end user license agreement with Twitter. And does that include them having the ability to just, you know, throw people off, particularly when, you know, that's a platform that's built on user generated content. Without users like Laura Loomer and others, Twitter is an empty web page. So I think we need to dig into some more of the details of what's going on there when they just throw off Laura Loomer, but leave people who are calling for jihad and people who are suggesting that others should harm the president. They're staying, and Laura Loomer is getting kicked off. So there's a lot of really strange things going on in our country right now. W. Roberts is telling us that the New York Post has a video of an unarmed black man who was shot and paralyzed because the police did not do their due diligence. I think we need to really examine this policy of police body cameras. I respect the police's need to, I mean, they're human beings, so we don't need body camera footage of policemen and women using the bathroom, for instance. But when a police officer is in his vehicle or her vehicle or on duty walking the patrol, I don't agree with them having the ability to turn it on and off. You know, Brian, there's some very interesting police body camera footage that was released recently by the Las Vegas Metro Police, and that just reminds me, I forgot to call somebody back this morning. We're going to be getting back into the Las Vegas shooting case because there's a lot of video evidence coming out now, and it's important. We see on such a small level, even there at the Rensselaer Republican, we see the news media manipulating the facts, basically not running your interview because they learned something about you and your book that perhaps isn't favorable to their friends. So they're editing the news, they're gerrymandering the news and delivering convenient facts rather than actual news. I think it's important that the people of Valparaiso and Rensselaer know that the judges are doing these things that they're doing. So it's just all the more reason for people to be purchasing Motion for Justice, I Rest My Case, because if you can't get the news from a newspaper, you need to get it from independent sources like Brian and his book and the Counterlawfare report here on Crowdsource the Truth.
Jason, could I add one thing here?
Please.
I believe we're going to do a show coming up, possibly even the next show, on jury nullification.
Yes.
And it's a very important subject, and we'll talk about it in great detail. But if there's been any people on a jury in the past, whether it be a criminal case or a civil case, perhaps if you'd like to come on the show, why don't you message us on the chat line on here, and we can kind of go from there. Maybe you can come on the show and we can talk about your experience as a juror. And then Jason and I are going to talk. We're going to tell people exactly what jury nullification is. It's
Absolutely.
A way that jurors are able to effect justice in the case when they actually see something wrong taking place in the case, and the things are lopsided going on, and they're trying to slant a certain decision a certain way that you may not agree with, that you may be able to go against just because of jury nullification.
Right. And of course, Brian is very active in responding to comments on the video. If you aren't watching live and you're not able to get your comment in while we're streaming live here, and we've got just a few minutes left, you can contact Brian on Twitter. I'm just trying to bring up your Twitter page here, Brian, and the internet is going very slowly.
Yeah, you can put a private message on there. You don't even have to. I don't care if you put it on there publicly, but you can also put it on there privately if you'd like.
Right. So you can either tweet at Brian or you can send him a direct message on Twitter. And I'm just going to bring up your Twitter page right here. Brian is on Twitter, of course. He is Motion for Justice, and that's the number 4. So people can follow Brian on Twitter. You can message him on there, and you can get updates about what he's up to and the broadcasts that we're doing here on the Counterlawfare Report, any interviews that Brian might be doing on television or in other newspapers, and of course when Brian had his book signing there at the Barnes & Noble in Valparaiso, Indiana, all of that type of information is on Brian's Twitter page. So Brian, we're just about done with our hour here. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we go?
No, I've been watching the comments and answering as many as I can, and I know you have as well. So I would urge the audience to continue writing their comments and their questions and so forth, and we'll do the best we can to answer them all. We want the people to be watching. We want the people to be engaged. And if they have any questions about anything, hey, we're just regular people, just like they are, and we want to see justice take place. And we want to answer questions when we can. So please stay involved, watch the show, and ask questions, make comments. It's a good gauge for Jason and I to see where we're going with the show, and it looks like it's headed in a very good direction. So things are looking good. We're gonna expose things, and we're gonna get a movement going, and we're gonna start getting some fairness to the people in our country, and we're gonna do it through this show right here.
Absolutely, Brian. And you know, it's interesting for me because as Crowdsource the Truth moves on into our second year here, each show has its kind of own personality and its own purpose. And I really enjoy the shows that you and I are doing. I think this is one of the most important shows that I have here on Crowdsource the Truth. They're all covering very important topics, but this is a real grassroots thing. I mean, I remember when I went to jury duty, they showed this whole movie about how participating in a jury is almost more important than voting for president, because you really are affecting justice in your neighborhood. I was on a jury for a murder trial here in New York City. So obviously we don't want people being murdered, and certainly if any of us were ever accused of anything, we want a fair trial by a jury of our peers. So keeping a close oversight on the fairness of our justice system is something that should matter to each of us, whether you're conservative, liberal, Republican, Democrat, black, white, Jewish, Christian, whatever you might be. This is such an important topic, and it transcends presidents, it transcends Congress representatives. So this is something we're going to stay on, and I really thank you greatly, Brian, for creating this show with me and giving us your time each week. So we'll see you next week at this same time, and thanks everybody for watching.
Thank you.